reflection. Hello, mate. You all right? Guys, we thought we'd do a bit of a video as we come to the end of a training block for many people, and sort of comes off the back of doing a lot of reflection, looking at how people's blocks have been, how the start of 2021's been. I think, Chris, it started with us talking today about, like we've seen on the Strava group, real good consistency from people, and whether this has come from a bit of lockdown and people having a bit more available time, or even if just enthusiasm for the start of the new year, if you like. And then as we get towards the end of the block and you start seeing in the last week of the block a different story emerging for different athletes, we thought it was quite a good idea to have a look at maybe some of the pitfalls that people are having in their training, or some of the things that are going really well for people, and share that with the group. And different things will resonate with different athletes, and it's all about refining what you do going into the next block, I think, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity just to reflect on what has happened. As I look back over this training block, there's things that that have gone reasonably well. There's some things maybe you could have done better, and I think it's always good just to reflect with with yourself and with your coach, and take some learnings ready for what's to come over the next month or so.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to talk about here is basically overload and recovery, and how important this is in training blocks and getting the timing of it right. And it's not about constantly trying to overload yourself. You've got to allow the body to recover and stuff. And we're going to show you some examples of this done well and this not done so well, and then the in between, how you can tweak it. So the first thing to say is we're going to post another video today as well, which is something we did quite a few years ago on the performance management chart. So anyone that's not totally up to speed with how Training Peaks records training stress, creates these charts in the background, watch that first. It's quite a long watch, about an hour, but stick it on when you're on the turbo one day or something, and pick the conversation up with your coach. All our coaches are well clued up on all this, so they can all guide you through it. So, and then the relevance of within your Training Peaks clean data. So some of the things I see going wrong are if thresholds are set wrong, TSS is being recorded too high. Some people at the moment I see, they're recording their Zwift workout into Training Peaks, but their Garmin's recording it as well. And there's actually a double workout going in and doubling the TSS of that day. So I think one thing we've all got to be conscious of is keeping your Training Peaks super clean for this to all be relevant for you. So I think the first thing we'll do, Chris, is look at one of your charts, or your chart first, from the performance management chart in Training Peaks. We won't go too much into what this means. That other video will explain it, but I'll just share my screen so that you can see it, Chris. Just one sec. Do you see that?
To give a little bit? Yeah. Do you want me to give a little bit of background before you maybe touch on some of the key points?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'll hover the cursor. I'll be your Blackboard assistant here and hover the cursor for you a bit. So.
All right. So this chart basically goes back to around the middle of October. We've managed to get a little bit of racing done through September. From myself, had Ellesmere and had Outlaw. And then basically started to hit a run block with inevitability that training stress would start to come down as you start to reduce the amount of swimming and biking, which you can see it's just starting to come down. With the sort of final goal of a 10K race, I had a 10K goal in the middle of October at Cheshire 10K, and then the middle of December, the 17th of December, I had a 10K at Mallory Park. So, and that was sort of the end of the year. And as you can see, there's a little bit of just natural fall off in terms of training load, training stress. But I think also it was just the end of a very long year of training, and you know, by the end, I was pretty much hanging on. And so once that race was done, there was very much a 10-day absolutely doing nothing, which you can see there as Phil sort of on the cursor. Before we start to think about the new year and starting, well, first of all, the Rafa 500 for me, and getting back into a little bit of easy running, and then the block training, which I think we started on the 4th of January there. Phil, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. So, and then obviously we've been into a 3-week block of training, which we're sort of 2 or 3 days away from finishing before we then effectively start a recovery week. And you can start to see the build in terms of training stress and moving back up. And as you can see, you know, within a very short space of time, even though you've had that recovery, you're almost like back to the levels of October, November, just from a 3 or 4 week block, but you know, feeling a lot more refreshed than maybe you did back then, and you can start to see where it can potentially get to over the course of the next 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, so like I suppose that the detail in this 3-week block, and that's what we're sort of reflecting on at the moment. But you know, the first thing I do is rewind on a chart like this and go, you know, you set yourself up for success here back in December. By taking that block and having the faith that the dip in recovery was the dip in fitness was required to freshen yourself up. And I think as I then sort of, you know, discuss with you like how your training stress balance, so this is effectively your fatigue, is heading down towards the -30 or just over -30 by the end of the block, but you were able to keep it there. If you hadn't have taken this block back here, I'm pretty sure, you know, this would have been much more difficult to maintain the load, wouldn't it? To, you know, towards the back end of the block. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, as I said, sort of like back in November, you know, and heading into that final race, I was literally sort of hanging on because we'd been training pretty hard since the start of the year, and with a race calendar that kept getting pushed back and back and back, and so naturally, you know, you've really got to have faith in taking that recovery, and you know, and that can be difficult at times because, you know, when I think back to, I was probably hitting some of the best bike numbers and run numbers that I'd ever seen. So, but you know, in terms of racing in May or June of this year, hopefully, then there's no way you could have kept that going all the way through.
Yeah. So I'll just very quickly then jump to some other types of charts that I see from athletes, and we'll just discuss what we're seeing there. And each athlete should be able to resonate with this. And what we're trying to do is set you up for success in the next block. You know, what are you going to do next week, Chris? Is, you know, no matter what you do, you've got to see this blue line drop away a bit next week. You're not going to let it drop down to where it was, but you've got to recover, let it drop and go again. And we'll get on to, you know, what's in the events calendar next week and why that works well. But if you don't let that drop away, you know, it cannot continue to rise at this rate. Fatigue just grows too much, and it's all just part of like you know, the microcycle of training, really, isn't it? So as I pull up this chart, which it follows quite a similar pattern. It's an example from another athlete, and actually it was the same idea. You know, run block through the autumn. Took some time off, pretty much exactly when Chris did, got some good recovery, started the block, and then for whatever reason, where Chris's chart managed to see the TSB continue to get closer to -30 and keep the strain on the body effectively, which is what this is representing on towards the end of the block. This athlete has sort of had a bit of a wobble here, and it's, you know, it's not a bad example, to be fair, but where Chris's CTL rose in a very straight line through the block, this one just starts to plateau a little bit at the top. And I suppose the reflection here is just as we head into the next block of training, be aware what you're doing in those first few weeks. There's a danger you hit the first week so fresh that you smash every session to death. And actually, that's where you can't hold on later in the block. It's those that can be strong through the block because they've judged everything quite well and the load has increased and the coach has written the right stuff and they haven't missed any sessions. And it's even missing 1 or 2 sessions in the last week because fatigue has got too great. That starts to cause this to happen. And I think we said on the call before this, Chris, we were talking about, one thing I think we can do better as coaches maybe is up front before a block kicks off, making sure people are very well sighted. How long is the block? What's the point of it? How do you approach week 1? Because actually weeks 2 and 3 will take care of themselves if you get week 1 right. So,
yeah, I think you make a good point there just around week 1 where you are fresh. And, I remember back to say like the 1 minute big gear intervals. It took a week or 2 to get the right resistance on there and, potentially wasn't hitting the power that potentially I could do. And, but I definitely saw progression through the 3 weeks worth of that same session. And the same with like the LT1 runs. I did them all on the treadmill. I just gradually brought like the pace down over the course of a couple of weeks, even if like I was just a little bit under, what my potential was. And it was probably more like a 95% effort. Whereas, definitely taking that Monday morning big gear session, it just looked like some people were absolutely smashing it in that first week and then never really moved forward from there.
Yeah. And I think that's where we look at the successful athletes through this block that they've seen an increase in pace or power or whatever through each session as it's gone on through the block. And so, what we're saying is this is all about reflecting. This is how you nail the next block yourself and take all these thoughts and use them. So I'll move to another example here, and this is something we do see a lot of. If the athlete watching recognises this, then I do know that there is possibly some data that needs cleaning up here. But I did see this a lot looking through athletes' charts yesterday, and it doesn't matter where people's CTL is, 50, 60, 100, whatever. We see this trend of people love training and they're obsessed with it. And even in like recovery week, which a lot of people will head into next week, they can't let off the gas. They're sneaking on the turbo for 90 minutes. They're doing, get another zone 2 riding. I don't want to put weight on. I don't want to lose fitness. And actually the overall result month after month of that is a chart that would look like this. You're never really overloading the system enough to get the progression. You reach a plateau. And I mean, if you look at this chart and you took the CTL numbers, you would say, well, this person's pretty damn fit, and they are. But my view is that, there's a way to make this person move on, and it's quite easy, but it's all about like making the training ebb and flow through blocks a little bit better with them. And I see it at all kinds of levels. And while we're talking about this, we are being observant as well that people aren't swimming as much, so there could be a drop in TSS from that. There's people are maybe riding indoors, so some of the rides are shorter for some people than they were back in the autumn. They're getting out, doing slightly longer, etc. But I think all our points are very valid, even taking that into consideration today. So yeah, if you've got a chart that looks a little bit, I mean, this is extremely flat, but there's a lot of peoples that just bobble along. It's time to make a bit of a step change there. Talk to your coach about knowing what's coming, commit to the block, ramp your CTL, let it fall away. I think that, I definitely know for some people it's the enjoyment of always training and always doing events and racing and stuff. But actually, if you're serious about progression, you've got to have these short windows where you really take a back seat and recover. Anything to add on that, Chris?
No, I mean, I was just going to like touch on the point you make about always like racing. And I think, one of the things I'm definitely seeing with some of my athletes is this, the constant racing in terms of like team time trial and Zwift racing leagues, and always wanting to be fresh and ready to give their all in these sessions is probably, you know, look, you know, in these difficult times, I can understand that, you know, there's a lot of enjoyment from doing these types of races, but in terms of long-term progression of these athletes, you know, it's almost like they're restricting their training stress or training load, and you know, there's no reason why you can't do these events, but sometimes you just have to accept that you know, you haven't got, you know, 100% on that day, and you know, 90%, and still getting through the training load, and the progression that you can kind of see will, over 3 or 4 months, they will reach a new level. And you know, I know in myself, the intensity's come down a little bit. I haven't raced at all, and it's definitely helped in terms of the focus of the training and sort of heading the right way for what's going to happen in 3 or 4 months' time. What I am looking forward to is this recovery week that I have coming up, and actually really looking forward to the multi-stage Zwift event we've got next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And because I haven't raced, you know, I bet by Wednesday or Thursday that, like, you know, I'm ready to go, and really looking forward to putting out some good numbers. Whereas I feel like if I'd raced every week, it would just be like another race, it'd just be another training session, and I just don't think I would get as much out of myself.
I totally agree, mate. I think, you know, a lot of us through this block have stepped away from weekly events and got a good block done. And I feel the same as you know, heading into next weekend, I'm already looking for, you know, I won't want to race this weekend, but I am looking forward to that, like, event. I'm nearly going to treat next week like a taper, get ready for it. And that's another way to look at next weekend, isn't it? You know, get your mind into a race mentality. With, you know, us not all having done as much racing in the last 12 months. So, and I think also when you look at it from a performance management point of view, you know, we get the racing done, you get a bit of training done around it either side, and your fitness on Training Peaks might bobble along a little bit for 10 days or so, and then we ramp it back up. You know, it will be in the right place to go up from there, and you've managed to have some fun in the interim with your fitness. I think it creates a good balance. Yeah, and then the very last chart I was just going to show, I don't want this to go on too long, was so this is actually my chart, and I'm showing this because, you know, I've got a lot of athletes who've had COVID or been injured or ill, and, you know, there's a bit of a depressing feeling for them at the start of the year. They're seeing so many people like training so well, and they want to be part of it. And I suppose, you know, I was pretty ill for the whole of December with some kind of virus. You know, don't really know what it was, but it really took the edge off me. So I just took a back seat and took it as added recovery. And I'd had a similar run block going through November as Chris, and where it looks like, you know, Chris took a purposeful recovery. Well, I took an enforced one. But I took it knowing that actually, you know, it'll be okay, because I know when I put 3 weeks together, like you can see here, you know, I was fully recovered going into it, so I could deal with the whole block. My TSB is down towards this -25, -30 area, and I sustained the block right to the end, as Chris did. The ramp rate was pretty solid. I definitely need some recovery now, but so those people that are just having a wobble at the moment, that, you know, are managing injuries and stuff, you know, take comfort in the fact that most of our athletes have done a lot of training over the years, and actually it's all there in you. You just need to get better and start a block, you know, with full commitment. And before you know it, you know, my illness over December's long forgotten now. You know, I feel like I've had a really good block. When I recover next week, I'm feeling good about racing, and that's how you should, you know, you should approach this. So yeah, I sort of wanted to do this video so there was something for everyone, you know, and that includes those who maybe haven't got perfect ramp rates and haven't done a perfect block. You know, this is what you need to aspire to for the next block when you are back to full training. So yeah.
I think one of the things here is that, if you consider racing in say June, and I'm just looking at the chart here, which you probably started at about 85 and you're going to probably end it at about 100. You're going to lose a little bit of CTL, and then you're going to do a February block, a March block, an April block, May, June, and suddenly you can see that by the time you get to June, theoretically you could be at 150 or 160, and you and I know that at those kind of levels you are very, very fit, and so when you are losing a week or two and you've lost 10 or 20 CTL, then in the grand scheme of racing in 5 or 6 months' time, it makes very, very little difference, because generally most of our athletes are pretty consistent in training and have put together months and months and years worth of training to bounce back.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah. And then the final point I've got noted here is, well, I suppose we discussed this idea that getting it right at the back end of the block is actually really, really critical. So just make sure you take that away with you, that it's not what you do in week 1, it's what you do in the back end of week 2 or even week 3 in a 3-week block. And then one of the things that is also just, we don't build training plans based off TSS. So we don't build a plan perfectly predicting where someone's going to end up in terms of fitness numbers at the end of the week. But as you can see, the plans that we and our coaches build, even without doing that, gives the right results if approached perfectly. The reason we don't do it is TSS in Training Peaks, which generates these charts, it doesn't account for all of life's other stresses and problems and illness and family chaos and all the usual stuff age groupers have. But what I think it has done is, as I've reviewed athletes' data for the last few weeks, I can use the chart to reflect on their block, knowing what's gone on in their life in the last few weeks as well. So whilst, when these charts always tell a story, don't they, Chris? And actually, if the training's gone a certain way, but I know there's been life issues factored into this, you can see that in the chart as you reflect. And some of these life issues sometimes are things that can be corrected or bettered for the next block. They're not always things that can't be helped. So, I think that's another discussion to have with athletes is how to enhance everything they're doing to support the training, if you like, to make these blocks work better.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that, as you get to understand the blocks and where you're heading, and almost like the importance, as you alluded to there, around, the biggest gains are going to come from that sort of like when you reach halfway and you're in the middle of week 2 and heading into week 3, that if you're having to stop the block early because of fatigue, then you're really missing out. You're not just missing out on 10 days out of 21, for example. Like every day that you continue, it's worth that little bit more. And so as you say there, just reflecting on this and understanding the block and what you're trying to achieve, and then trying to, as you say, make it better next time. It's all learning, and there's many times you and I have got it wrong, and so it's actually quite nice this time to it feels very, very good to me, coming to the end and almost like nailing it. So it's all learning.
Yeah, we just reiterate that little bit though, that it's not like we're now going to take 4 or 5 days recovery and repeat this exact thing again to get the same. There is opportunity to race. There is also us going, well, it's still January. If someone's at, as you can see there, I'm at 98 CTL or something. Is there a rush to send me to 120 CTL? Not really, no. It's just getting the timing right. So there's opportunity for lots of things, but as you then go, right, now I'm committing to a block of training. And what you said about things like racing every week, I personally find that very difficult to do a block of training. And I think some of the guys I've spoken to have said, you know, there could be a window, you know, in a few weeks' time where we go, let's not race for 3 weeks. Let's get a block of training done, go back to your racing and race better. You know, and that's what, you know, professional athletes go and do, isn't it? You know, a lot of the pro cyclists you see out there, they go through a block of racing, then they go away to disappear. They fall off the radar for a month or two while they go and get fit somewhere. So
I think that's a good point. I think you know, we already feel like the triathlon season is quite short, and so you know, we tend to just put races in every 3 or 4 weeks, and you know, expect to just keep progressing as the season goes on. You know, and when I think back to 2018, where the pair of us probably had our best performance, and you know, went to Holcombe in July, and then, you know, in the past, maybe we would have, you know, in the lead up to the World Champs, we would have liked that other race that was like 3 or 4 weeks out, just to go and test where we are. But we didn't do it this time, and we got our heads down for 8 weeks, and then popped up at this race, and you know, it was definitely our best performances, probably by a long way on the back of that. So you know, we always remember that.
Sometimes you just have to get your head down and do the work, don't you? And that, you know, and do it, you know, get it done for a block or two, and it makes a big difference to performance. And you know, that ultimately we all like racing, but it's those big days you remember, isn't it? And that's what you're chasing all the time. That, you know, those big moments. So yeah, good stuff, mate. So look, guys, I hope you've taken quite a bit out of this. And you know, if you don't get a chance to watch it the weekend, if you're on recovery week next week, you've got no excuses. Plenty of time to watch it. So cool. And yeah, cheers, Chris. Thanks for that.
Cheers, mate. All right, bye.
Thank you, mate.